One-time money is still a lot of money. It still does put us in a little bit better direction. Again this year, the governor is proposing increasing spending above and beyond the state's current revenue capacity. It still relies on additional federal dollars and the elimination of most reserves. I also find it ironic that the governor, less than a month ago, called on our local school districts to hold their budget increases at 3%, yet here today he's proposing a budget, based on my numbers from Joint Fiscal Office, is over 5%. Proposing a budget that exceeds the growth rate of Vermont's economy and the paychecks of taxpayers' wallets is bad policy and not financially sustainable. Over the last 10 years, the general fund spending has grown at an average rate of 3.6%. However, during the Shumlin era, we have seen significantly higher spending levels without the revenue to support it. Again, today we have that same situation. These spending trends can be found on this chart, which I hold before you, that we called for, that shows year-over-year spending and growth rates for the last 8 years. So we find that this is a very important document for Vermonters to watch what's happening with state dollars, revenue, and spending. This trend does not bode well for the future of Vermont and its economy. Today, I'm going to have a few of my caucus members speak on different aspects of the budget that the governor touched on. First and foremost, we have Representative Carol Brannigan. She's going to talk about taxes and education.
Thank you, Don. He only says I'm foremost because I'm taller than everybody else, that's all. Every legislator I know is interested in providing the best education for our Vermont school children that taxpayers can afford. And this includes my former colleague, Peter Shumlin, who's now governor. But the balance between the best education and affordability is a careful balance. I was glad to hear that the governor will consider a new workable funding system this year. We need one. Let's hope that other legislators heard that too, because getting it through the House and the Senate is going to be the difficult part. The governor today asked Vermonters to scrutinize their school budgets, looking for ways to reduce cost. Now, let's think a minute about the reasons why Vermont tax rates continue to rise for school spending. It's not only the per pupil cost. To a large extent, it's what we do here in the State House that makes those tax rates go up. Much of our current school funding is based on property value. The statewide grand list is declining and is projected to sink another 0.5% this year, and the difference will be made up in the local tax rate. Sales and use taxes don't keep up with increases in school spending. They won't this year either. The increase will fall short another 0.8%, and that difference will have to be made up with the local school tax rate. Same with the purchase and use tax, falling 1% behind school spending this year, and the difference will have to be made up on the local tax rate. Consider these things along with the homestead property tax adjustment that we give. This year it was $145 million, next year $154 million. This is money that we give out to Vermonters to cover their school taxes because they can't afford it. All of these expenditures add up and have to be picked up in the local tax rate, and it makes it very, very difficult for Vermonters when scrutinizing those school budgets to make ends meet. Our funding system is broken, and we need a new one. All of these proposals together drain the Ed Fund reserves to nearly nothing. The governor didn't tell us how he intended to refill the reserves, only that he would. The current funding system isn't working anymore. It can be replaced, but we will need the governor's support in order to do that.
We have Tom Koch.
This news conference is based on limited information. Traditionally, and this governor is no different, the governor's budget is kept under wraps until he makes his speech. So we've heard the speech. There's more detail in this thin book, and then there's a whole slew of books that stack up that the committees of appropriation and some other committees will be getting. We haven't even seen that, and we haven't had a chance to read this. So we're working based largely on what we just heard. I want to address just the opiate situation, however, very briefly. The governor proposes $650,000 for substance abuse and mental health treatment for reach-up recipients. That reveals a problem that we have not previously acknowledged. If that money is needed, then we have a real problem in the reach-up program that we've been carrying for a number of years, and yes, it's time to address it. And the 14% increase in prevention services and the 40% increase in treatment services is, for those of us who have been laboring in this vineyard for a dozen or more years, very welcome. We appreciate the governor's support for increased opiate treatment, prevention. The programs that he announced last week are most welcome. What I want to see, however, is how this money is going to be applied and the detail of it. One thing I certainly hope we see is some increased funding for our local recovery centers, such as the Turning Point Center that we have on North Main Street in Barry. We have them in various parts of the state, White River, Colchester, other places. They are really the best bang for the buck, and I hope they need some additional money, and I hope they get it. But increased capacity for methadone and Suboxone, right, is needed because we can't let people who are willing and ready to go into recovery and treatment wait on a waiting list. Tell them come back in 3 weeks. Well, in 3 weeks they're back with their habits, and it's too late. We need to be able to react when the addicts are ready for treatment. So this increase in funding is most welcome, and I do support that part of the governor's budget.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. I'm going to focus on some transportation issues, and today, as we heard, personally for me and for members of my committee, we have 33 million reasons to smile today, and I'll be smiling all the way home. Very pleased to hear the governor's commitment to our transportation system to the tune of about $685 million this year. That's an increase of 33 million. The governor's transportation program supports VTran's vision of a safe, efficient, and multimodal transportation system. It promotes Vermont's quality of life and economic well-being. Key components of this budget, they emphasize economic development, safety, preservation, and maintenance of existing transportation infrastructure, and that's very important. We're not looking at any new projects, any large, big-ticket items this year. We are focusing on what we have and maintaining them in a safe and reliable manner. So, in short, I will give you those reasons to be happy today about the news on the transportation side, and we look forward to working with this budget and bringing it back to the full body. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be speaking about specifically the Teachers Retirement Fund. I was very pleased to see that the governor is putting forth another $2.5 million this year. Added to the $4 we put in last year, that'll give us $6 million. Last year was $20 million is what was needed to fund the teachers' retirement. This year it's estimated to be at about $24 million. That means we're only going to be funding the teachers' retirement at 25%. It is a major step in the right direction, but it is not enough. I do applaud the governor for saying that we need to find a funding source for this problem, and it needs to be done this session. And I agree with him, and I would be glad to work with him on that funding source. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Joe Benning. I'm a state senator from Caledonia Orange. This is the second time I've come to a news conference podium in less than a week, and I have not had any notes with me. And the reason for that is I haven't had anything to write down. I'm here to talk about Green Mountain Care, which you heard about very briefly in the governor's address this afternoon. And unfortunately, I hear nothing more than campaign rhetoric. Vermonters are facing a very serious issue. And it is time for us to start asking the tough questions and incorporate those questions into an actual game plan for how to deliver a system that is bigger than anything any of us in our lifetime have ever seen instituted in the state of Vermont. Vermonters have a right to know. This is not a nothing burger. Simply put, where is the beef? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it? And how are we going to pay for it? Those issues remain unstated. So tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon in room 11, we intend to get the conversation started. Senator Galbraith has introduced Senate Bill 252. It is the only game plan that is out there right now for any of us to actually examine and talk about whether or not it can actually meet the objective. So the Senate Republican Caucus at noontime tomorrow will be meeting in room 11 with Senator Galbraith to explain the bill. I hope that you will all come out and ask the tough questions that we need to start asking ourselves right now if we're going to have any chance of having a system in place by 2017. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In closing, I want to put numbers, dollars, to percentages. I talked percentages earlier in this conference. A 5% increase in spending equates to about a $70 million increase over last year. Last year the state of Vermont spent about $1.37 billion. The governor's proposal today is $1.44 billion. So that's what that number, the 5%, equates to. Republicans will work together this session, hopefully in a bipartisan manner, to rein in the general fund spending, reduce the state's dependence on federal dollars, grow reserves, address the pension fund shortfalls, improve eligibility systems to reduce federal penalties, and continue to seek finite details on the governor's initiatives, such as healthcare reform and pre-kindergarten education. The well-being of Vermonters is at risk here. It's our job to represent their interest, as we promised when we took the oath. Vermonters deserve the answers, and we're here to ask the tough questions. Thank you. Take a couple questions, and then we'll decide.
So do you think it's too big? Do you think the growth in the budget is too big? Where would you cut it? What programs do we not need or can't afford anymore?
Well, I think there's a lot of eligibility. We talked about eligibility issues and things like that. As Representative Koch said, we'll be working on this starting today with our appropriations and Ways and Means people to develop those answers. We do know that human services is the biggest area of the budget. We know that the eligibility requirements are very generous in those areas. We also heard the governor, which we applaud. VHCB and conservation has been a priority. He is now moving some of that money to some of these human services programs. So we'll be looking at scrutinizing all those areas.
$33 million new dollars in the transportation fund. We recently saw a $21 million gas tax increase. Is that going to be necessary again?
That's a good question. We applaud. We all know, we all drive here on a regular basis and know the roads in Vermont need some work. So I think that we all can say and agree on that. How that money is raised, how it's going to be used, we will learn that as we move forward. Again, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you being here, and we'll bring you more as we go.